So I was born in Italy, which some don't know. My dad was in the military, so he was based out in Italy with the Royal Navy. And with my dad's military background, I just followed his footstep and decided to join the Navy. One day, it wasn't a prolonged plan thing, it was pretty much on the spot. Oh, I know, I joined the Navy as well. And I went and joined. I remember getting on the train, my parents dropped me off at the train station, and I just was shell-shocked. Even though I made the decision, the reality is just very different. And I remember travelling down to Plymouth, and those that are in the Royal Navy will know this journey. And the first couple of days, you just think, oh, what am I doing? Like, is this the right thing? And then you just kind of step into it. And it was the best decision that I ever made. And I was actually 17 when I decided. And you think to yourself, how do you know what you're doing? But, it brings a family unit, there is unity across the board. It brings you stability, your own independence. I really do think those, through schooling, rather than continued education, military is a great option. So I joined the logistics originally, went into human resources. So in the Navy, we're called a writer. And so through Plymouth, for a fair few years in Plymouth, I volunteered and went out to Iraq doing logistics. I've been to Portsmouth. I was lucky enough to be posted to Italy, where I was born. I went from logistics doing kind of pay, HR, and then moved on to being personal assistant to some of the admirals within the Navy. Iraq, I volunteered myself to be on the ground in Iraq. And I was HR again and a personal assistant to the quartermaster that was out there. It was a great tour. It was one of my greatest memories. For me, I was in Baghdad, so I wasn't with everyone else that's known as the Red Zone. I was pretty safe and secure and lived a fairly normal life up there. Afghanistan, I can't discuss Afghanistan. That's a classified role that I did, not within logistics, outside of logistics. PTSD, unless you've been through it, I think I was ignorant to it to begin with. And even when I was suffering with it at the early days, I didn't believe it was PTSD. For me, it manifested over a period of 9 months before I even realised that I was suffering. And it was on the back end of kind of a classified tour that I did. And I just slowly started to deteriorate physiologically, not psychologically. And I think that's a big misconception people have is people think, oh, you've got PTSD, you're a nutter, literally. And I've heard that phrase used, and it's not. For me, I psychologically was sound. Physiologically, I was training for a Rome marathon out there. And I was just getting weaker. My hair started falling out. And I mean, my big curly hair was it was just up to here, like my eyebrows, eyelashes. My skin was completely different. It was kind of like hives, like I'd been in stinging nettle bushes all over. And just day by day, it was just getting progressively worse. Then my cognitive function started getting affected. So I would drive getting in a car, for instance, I'd have a few minutes where I totally forgot how to drive. I'd be like, how do I even use this thing? And it'd be really strange. I was like, what's going on? And then I would get to a toll booth and look at the money and think, I don't even know how to count this. I see it, I know what it is, I can't physically count this. And at the time I was doing a job as a personal assistant to an admiral, and I'd be on the phone taking a phone call for him, and as soon as I'd put the phone down, I just couldn't recall the conversation at all. And bit by bit, my personality, I started suffering with this horrific anxiety, an anxiety I'd never known ever existed. And the admiral at the time that I was supposed to be looking after, started looking after me. And I spent many weeks within an American hospital getting test after test after test. And initially they thought I had a brain tumour because of the symptoms that I was showing. And there was nothing there. And I went through tests, cameras, blood tests, you name it, I went through it. And each week I just slowly, something was chipping away from me. I got asked the question, what do you need? And all I said is, I just need to go home. I just couldn't function. And I just got to the point. I still run the Rome Marathon. I got told not to run the Rome Marathon, but, military training again, you dig deep. When you don't know what the problem is, you just got to keep on putting your best foot forward. hoping that whatever it is going to resolve itself. And running was just, I just loved to run. So I thought, if I gave that up, I'm giving everything else up. And everything else felt like it was crumbling at the time. And yeah, from that point, I got sent back to the UK, and I went back into kind of a HR job, a very basic job. And I could do that very basic job for the whole day. And then it slowly deteriorated to just half the day. And then it slowly deteriorated. I'd turn up for a couple of hours, and I either couldn't remember what I was doing, or I was so exhausted. I was white as a sheet, and I just wanted to sleep. And still, no one had a clue what was going on with me. They sent me to special disease unit thinking, did I pick something up on one of the tours? And more blood tests. And eventually someone pieced the jigsaw together, because the Navy didn't know the job I'd done or what I'd specialised in, because I was seconded. And so on record, I hadn't been in any area of conflict to kind of cause PTSD. So no one looked at it and considered it to be PTSD. And then when they realised, it was in fact a civilian psychologist that realised it was PTSD, not even military themselves. When they realised, my specialisation was interrogation, and kind of the job that I'd done and what I'd seen and what I'd had to, what I underwent for this particular role, then they realised, they thought, hold on a minute, has anyone considered PTSD? And I was like, no, it's not PTSD. I'm fine. I feel fine. Psychologically, I feel fine. And so they said, right, let's just do a bit of counselling. Let's just see. And yeah, it just opened the floodgates. And from that point is when I was diagnosed with PTSD. There's far much more support now than there was back in the day when I was, going through this. And this started in 2012 for me. They do decompress. When you go in any area, any operational tour, you'll decompress. But PTSD, like we said, manifested within 9 months of me. So when I come back from tour, I was fine. When I was decompressed, I was fine. My decompression, as in when someone checked in on me and said, are you feeling okay? It was literally 2 sentences. Oh, hi, Nick. Are you going to kill yourself? No. Are you going to kill your family? No. Off you go then. That's all I had when I returned. But at the time, they were like true answers, and no one says, oh, we'll just check on her in 9 months' time, because, you'd be forever checking on people. So it's not like the system is broken to a degree, but I think it's not set up for the reality of some of the outcomes that occur. Your stereotypical PTSD is you've been in an area of conflict, or an area where there's been an incident, a single or multiple incidents that has traumatised you. For example, those guys out on patrol in Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever, and, their patrol's hit by an IED. Then that's a traumatic incident, and then has triggered PTSD, therefore. And you can make sense of that. For me, I couldn't make sense of something that I wasn't a part of. But when it was broken down, and, PTSD is no easy thing to get through. 5 years, it took me 5 years to become a person again. Not even the person, a person again. 5 years of being totally numb, my whole life literally going to ground zero. And the only way that I figured out what it was using EMDR. And that's eye movement desensitization. And it was more like being on a train and Polaroids coming on and stuff. So it looked at how I felt morally with things that happened. So that affected me. The environment affected me. The self-induced pressures affected me. It's the sleep deprivation affected me. The food deprivation. It was the individuals themselves, the anxiety itself, and these are single incidents or entities. Don't bother, they're fine. You can deal with it. But when you've got a prolonged period with the level of stress, but then you're gathering life-saving intelligence to save a person, the pressure you put yourself under, the pressure command put you under, if you sleep, that's time you could have spent saving somebody else. Or if you eat, do you deserve to eat? Did you ask the right question to get the right intelligence, And then your mind, even though you're not actively thinking like this, your mind is acting like this. And it's thinking, okay, well, I'm tired, I can deal with that. And, morally, I think that's wrong, but, I'll get past this point because the outcome far outweighs the current feeling. And it's that amalgamation of everything for a prolonged period of time where I suppose your mind just gets burnt out. So PTSD is it's not about single or multiple traumatic just incidents. It can be a whole workup of a magnitude of things. And then all of a sudden it's like, no more. That's it. I'm done. Being in the military, we're built to be kind of robotic. So we never go on tour. I never stepped into Iraq or Afghanistan and even feared anything. I didn't. I was fearless. That's the way the military built me. And I suppose to then admit that something's wrong, it's like, one, I'm not trained like that. Two, everyone else will look down on me and think that I'm not strong anymore or I'm broken, especially a female in the military. We already overcome so much in the military, to gain the respect in the positions that we take, and I had a fantastic career and incredible roles and incredible amount of responsibility, to others and the roles that I was doing. And I feel very strong about the roles and how strong and able I was. But then when someone said it was PTSD, I thought, oh, God, no. And even to this day, I still feel a bit like, oh. And I wanted to work through it as quickly as possible, because then if I was slightly broken or felt broken, I was quickly fixed and then I wasn't anymore. And I can say to everyone, it's fine. But it just isn't like that. And for me, the physiological side was tough. But then when the psychological side stepped in, I speak to a lot of veterans now and I support a lot of veterans still suffering. And we talk each other's language when we're talking, because we can't put into words just what it feels like to have PTSD. We know it's a thing, we know it's there, but you can't. And I always say, like, every day you step forward, it's like the Grim Reaper tapping you on the shoulder and pulling you back. So you think you've made progression and actually you're even worse. And then you're just catapulting back and forth, and it's just horrific. And I was getting day terrors and night terrors, and imagery was popping up. And like, I just remember one face just sat on my shoulder constantly. Everywhere I went, this face was like thing. And using EMDR, I pixelated that. Like, I can still picture it now because I'm picturing what I used to feel like a thing, but there's no emotion attached to it. And that's how powerful I think EMDR is. There'll be many people that watch this and think, no, we don't do EMDR. No, it's not within the guidelines. No, it's rubbish. But I think, there's not one fix for everybody. It's your own personal being and what you believe in and what you believe works for you. And it worked for me. But I got this anxiety that was so debilitating. I didn't even want to leave the house. So I get up in the morning, even to go and get a pint of milk from my local shop. I was so terrified, and I didn't know what I was terrified of. I would exhaust myself to the point of every lunchtime, by 12, I was in bed for another 4 hours sleep. And I hadn't even done anything. But the thought of doing something exhausted me. And then the thought of progressing in life, like, oh, how do I go to work? How do I do this? Oh, I've got to drive here and I've got to do this. And, it just that burns you out. But like I said, there is no, if you break your leg, someone can say, oh, I can see your leg's broken. If you've broken your leg, you say, my pain's in my leg. You can pinpoint stuff. It's easier to understand and it's easier to explain. But with PTSD, you can't. You can't say to someone, I just feel like death today. Why? I don't know. Like, it sounds depressing, doesn't it? People think, oh God. And I lost friends, work, career, family, respect. Like, I lost everything through PTSD because it was like I was trying to climb Mount Everest by sitting down and laying in my bed and still thinking I can achieve Everest. Like, it's just impossible. I suffered part while I was in the military, and then a lot when I left the military. And I think that's another thing, the transition, that can be a huge trauma to some, to leave the military or your career has ended because of something you had no control over. But for me, the Italy was a military role, and that was my final role. I know I come back to the UK to do some kind of admin job, but that really was the start of the suffering. The military kept me in. I was actually to be discharged 6 months earlier than I was, but I was suffering so much in such a way that people couldn't understand or explain, that it would be a disservice to have released me then to then have to then tackle the civilian side. So they kept me in for intense therapy for 6 months until they felt that I was strong enough to transition out of the military. And then you've got to start again. The civilian side, having civilian therapists support you, where the military, once you've left, you've left. That's it. One day I woke up and I just thought, enough's enough, and the military might teach us to fight a war, but sometimes the war is internal, and that is really what PTSD is. And I just saw each day I just need to tackle this, because I can't live like this anymore. I can't live like a zombie. I can't live not enjoying life and not partaking in anything. Where does this go? And so I started to fight back. So, for instance, what's the opposite to debilitating anxiety? Something that stops you doing everything and being around people. So for me, it was public talking. It was the opposite of what I could see. So then I went and spoke at an expo, that had a footfall of 12,000 people. And I had to push myself. I had to do it. And that is my military training kicking in. And I just saw, and from that day, when I got up and I spoke, in the public, considering a week before I wouldn't even go get a pint of milk, from that point I knew there was no excuse ever to stay in ever again. And I just started doing that. And it was baby steps at the beginning. Medication the military put me on was horrific. That took 42 days to come off of. So I got off of that and I felt a new lease of life. And I wasn't sure what was underneath, but, it was for the better. And, and then the next day I would wake up and think, oh, how are you feeling today, Nick? Oh, God, my anxiety. And I literally would be like, piss off. And I would talk to it and think, no, I'm not giving in to you today. What, you're tired? No, it's fine. And I just started doing the opposite of how I was feeling until I taught myself again that I don't need to give in to this. And people say, oh, it's easier said than done. It really is easier said than done. But you just got to do it. You either stay in where you are and how you're feeling, or you do something about it. And you have to have this support. So you make sure that people put the right things in place. So I have a good family. So that was one. I had a really good psychologist, and EMDR was really powerful for me. So I knew I had the mechanisms. I used the military to pay for me to qualify in advanced Pilates as an instructor, to understand the technicality in order to balance the mind and the body. So that was another part. And then piece by piece, my cognitive function started gearing up. It's like the fire lit again inside my system. And I started to be able to articulate myself better and going to work and pressing this and seeing family and socialising. And then before you know it, you're on the other side and you think, oh, how did I get this side? And then it just leaps and bounds. And then you treasure every day and you think, well, that's how I did this, and just keep on going, and things just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I got headhunted by Channel 4, for Hunted, which is just fantastic. I get to do all my training in an environment of maximum fun, minimal risk, where every job I've ever done is, there's risk to it, or there's danger. And I qualified within close protection, so protecting others, protective surveillance. I do surveillance ops, and private investigating. So I do that whole array of good stuff, and that was just bouncing off of my military training within interrogation. And then, built a company within protective services. And really, if you look at me in 2012 to now, you think that's not the same person. And I think, I think the military training helps. Two, I think I've always been like that as a person, probably as a youngster. I think I've always looked at something, whether it's a disaster or trauma or something, and think, well, how can I flip this constructively to better myself or better the future? Because I'm not just going to stand here and accept this. And I'm not. And I can't think that's the attitude that I had with PTSD. And, now I also support veterans and mentor them through, some of their processes. Like I said, it's having the right people, the right tools around you to be able to progress forward. And that's what I try and install into other veterans that I speak that are still suffering. They can reach out to me, I can help guide them or signpost them to the right people, or employ them if they're within close protection or SIA.
Hi, and welcome to Deep, We love making videos, meeting people and letting them tell their stories.
We really hope you're enjoying the channel, and if you are and would like a bit more,
We've just launched the series as a podcast on Spotify.
It's the full interviews uncut, so you can hear the whole thing, wherever you are, at home or on the go.
But no matter where you're watching the content, please remember to like, comment and subscribe, as it really helps the channel.
And don't forget to drop a comment below and tell us who you'd like us to talk to next.
Thank you. Now, back to our story.
Okay, cool.
I think it's close protection was a natural progressive step from the military. So in the military, we're there to protect. So being a bodyguard, search close protection is, for me, it's protecting someone. It's in my nature anyway. That is the role that I take within my family and professionally. So we have kind of close protection, which is they know, and then we've got surveillance where you put someone under surveillance. So when we're doing protective surveillance, we're protecting them, but we've put them under surveillance to protect them. Mm-hmm. So, you know, a normal covert op that I might do for surveillance is putting someone under surveillance because they've done wrong, and we're trying to find the flaw. We're trying to capture their pattern of life because there's a negative. But protective surveillance is, you know, positive. We're protecting someone that doesn't necessarily want to be protected because they want their own space and lifestyle, but they need protecting. But they fight against it, even though they know it's good for them. So they bring us in, so we're there. So those around them know we're there and they can continue living a normal life. I remember sitting there, laying there on the beach in my bikini with binoculars thinking, oh, I love my life. Like, this is really cool, you know. Although if I do need to act and go and protect them, I'm in my bikini. So the reality is that everything is like laid in the sand. It's like an imprint of a body. The shorts, the top, like the shoes. So you literally get dressed instantly, but you've got to blend, haven't you? So if I was there in full gear, kept staring in one direction, people are like, what's that person doing? It's really hot, it's 40 degrees, and you're sat there like you're in the winter. That's not good surveillance, is it? You know, people will notice me. So for me to blend, I have to become the environment. I love Hunted, and anyone that watches it will probably know that I love it, and anyone that knows me. But Hunted came about before COVID, and I actually got headhunted across LinkedIn, and then COVID hit. And so the opportunity went away, and I didn't think it was ever going to come back around. And actually, when I actually got the emails, I actually thought it was a bit of a hoax. And I do know a lot of people that would do these kind of jokes on me. So it wasn't unexpected for someone to be like, haha, I'm only joking. So I was really sceptical. And I kept responding, and I thought, what? And then, yeah, when I ended up coming for a screening, I thought, oh, this is actually real. Like, you know, but like I said, it's the only job that I've ever done and that I still ever do that is minimal risk, maximum fun, you know, and I get to utilise my skill sets, you know, interrogation when we go in. Yeah, you don't see that much on TV, but we actually do really interrogate the families, and we do search the houses a lot, and we find some weird and wonderful things, and we have some great conversations. But, you know, there is a lot of hours filmed and only an hour's episode to get it into, so you don't really see the working mechanism, but we are run off our feet. We're exhausted by the end of the day, and we're travelling miles and miles and miles in the day. People think we just get a phone call and they're there and we run and get them, and it's all set up and it's all scripted, and it's the complete opposite. Probably one of the best roles I've done, just because of the fun and the people that I work with. You know, there is a couple of ex-military within it, but most are ex-police or active police. So it's a whole kind of new environment, a new way of thinking with some individuals that we work with. So it's just pretty much an honour to be in an environment with that much talent. I think the main memory for me is just my first capture and the adrenaline, like the true adrenaline. You forget that you're in a game. You really forget that, you know, it is a game of cat and mouse, really, isn't it? It's a human game of tag. But I remember it was Ollie Lock. And I actually, when I seen the celebrities that were on it, I marked his card and I really wanted to get him. And when we went into this village, and you never know if they're going to be there or not. You have to scan the environment, and if you see them, you're lucky enough. But I remember getting that excited. I tried to jump out the vehicle while it's still moving. And obviously for camera, that's not good, is it, for our safety? So I remember like having to retake it and stuff. But I just remember chasing after them, and the adrenaline, like my legs were shaking, like it just, the whole adrenaline, you kind of until you watch it on camera. And I don't see what's on camera until everyone else sees it on TV. So I actually don't know how I acted or how I behaved or what I said or anything, and it's just this whole miss. But I think that'll always hold close to me, just because it was my first capture. It was the first series I ever did. It was the best environment, and they were just great captures anyway. I think, if we look at women that are going through fertility treatments and just the stress in itself, and how it can cause, people to have failed IVF and then they stop. As soon as they stop and they stop thinking about it, they feel pregnant, right? And now, so PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, it's in the title. I definitely think it affected me. And for years, I always wanted to be a mum. Always, I've got 7 amazing nephews and nieces. I love being an auntie. Like, I truly love it and stuff. But to have my own baby was just always my dream. And I've tried my entire life, really, and never fell pregnant, never even got close to it, had loads of tests, like nothing. And everything was fine. And then as soon as I had PTSD, definitely, like, fertility wasn't working. And then as soon as I got tested, my fertility levels were rapidly decreasing, like huge. So, without going too much into the technical side, those going through fertility will know that AMH levels, mine was, say, 4.3, and then within 1 year it was already down to 1.2. And then, so the thought of another year I'd be infertile, in theory, at that rapid reduction and stuff. So I think it played a huge stress on my body. As soon as I overcome PTSD and as soon as I relaxed into my environment, things started working again, and I've been blessed with my miracle. Because there's no definitive test that says, oh yes, that's connected to PTSD. They like to say, well, it's not. Well, of course it is. Your body's going through this unknown trauma in itself, probably because of a trauma, and you're trying to battle this, your mind, your body. My digestive system totally broke down. Like, it just stopped working, and like everything broke down. So why wouldn't fertility be affected as well? And I think, people need to look at the bigger picture, especially with fertility, and say, what is the external factors within this person's life, as well as what's the physical factors, and what do the test results see? And I think you'll find that PTSD has affected a high percentage of women that are suffering with it. I definitely think there's triggers. I don't think it's never gone away. I think there's certain triggers, like there's one thing that really, really bothers me still now, and it's repetitive noises. So if someone's tapping in a nail or clicking keys, it's like a million people shouting. And I know that's connected to PTSD. So for me, that's what's left. That's the residue of PTSD. I also think that I probably deal with it better. So I probably don't know there's more things that bother me with PTSD, and get triggered. I just know I'm very in tune with my body now because of that suffering and because of how I got through it by each step, each day, how I feel, and really listening to myself. I think I just handle it better. So if I am feeling, a little bit anxious about something, it could be that I'm just anxious, or is it linked to PTSD? Who knows? But I don't take any risks. So I just deal with it as I would for both, and press forward. So is it there? Probably. Do I deal with it every day? No. Do I feel like I'm suffering every day? No. There's just the odd little tap on the shoulder just to remind me that it's been there, or it's still hanging around, or however you want to portray it. But I just think it's about how you accept it. Acceptance is probably the biggest thing in the military. Accept it, own it, and press forward, and use every bit of training, every tool in the box to get through to the other side. My little dog, little Pixie, I had her from 8 weeks old. And she's the reason I got up every day. And I truly believe, the American tact of having, veterans and animals and stuff better than medication. I agree with this. I had medication which zombified me. So was I living a life? No, I was containing it. And was I in control of my behaviour or how I thought? No, because medication was dictating it. And for me, that just wasn't for me. It's for some, but it wasn't for me. But my dog was the reason I got up every day. I had to get up every day. She needed to go out for a walk or go in the garden at least. She needed food. I wasn't going to let her suffer when I was suffering. Like, that's cruel. That'd be like neglect, and I'd hate myself forever then. So for me, you know, anyone that is quite lonely, anyone that hasn't got a huge network around them, you know, invest in a little dog that's not, doesn't need a million miles of walk every day, that can give you that comfort, that has that loyalty, because she really got me through it. She won't never know it, but she really got me through it. And like I said, everything else around me, and just putting that is, but you can have a million people around you, but you still feel very lonely with PTSD. And I hit some very low points, very, very low points, like unexplainable low points. And I just thought, why, like, this life is rubbish. I'm no longer in the military. I can't see anything past, like, my feet. There is no pathway for me. And this suffering is horrific because I can't even explain the suffering and I can't get past it. And so, yeah, it becomes a very dark place for those suffering. And, you know, how many people say, oh, I know what you're going through. Well, do you? You know, you don't. Even a therapist, that therapist, for me, I'm a strong character. You know, I was trained as an interrogator. So to have a therapist, when I already know pretty much what questions they're asking, I played a lot of games at the beginning because, one, I was in denial. Two, I just thought, oh, this is a challenge, until they picked me up and said, you're actually playing a game with me. And I had to start taking it serious. And yeah, I just progressed on from there, really. I still love it to this day. I love interrogating people. I still do it now to everybody. I love interrogating information. I love piecing the jigsaw together. You know, I love all of that. It's so for me, even to this day, I don't feel affected by my military career in any capacity. PTSD took, I think, 5 years of my prime life, the pinnacle, when I should have really been living. And that I'll always be sad for. And I'll always be sad that I didn't see what I see now, because we don't when we're in the thick of it, and no one can teach you that and stuff. But truly, what's on the other side is just worth living for, and it's worth fighting for. And I wouldn't have got through any of that if I didn't have my military training. And I wouldn't be the best mum I am now to Elodie, like my little miracle, if I didn't have all that military training to be able to be a strong mum for her. So yes, I would go back and do it all again. If they asked me, Nick, can you go tomorrow and go do this? I'll be like, okay. Before, I thought I was kind of fearless in the military. And again, that's how they build you. But I needed a reality check, and boy, did that give me a reality check. But it taught me to appreciate even the smallest of things in life. And this is why I'm, you know, being unhunted, you know, being in that environment, being with those people, you know, I'm grateful for all of that. I'm grateful that I got to a position where I could do something like that. You know, my company of protecting others, you know, I'm grateful that I'm in a position that, you know, I might not necessarily go on the ground now because people know me from hunted. So for me to do surveillance would be reckless, but I bring in the teams to do it, you know, and try and fix people's problems. So, you know, all in all, like, is the pathway that was made for me, and the person I am today, I absolutely love. When I actually went into the environment for interrogation, there was someone stood up and they said this: if you don't want to change as a person, get up and leave now. And I, being the arrogant person I was at the time, I actually turned around to a very good friend of mine and said, oh, God, how much can one thing change a person? And I was so naive. So I would say to my younger self is, don't be naive. Take each day as it comes, but, you know, there is a reality to some decisions. You have to understand that some decisions, there is the outcome you may not want. And it's not all, you know, fearless and you're strong and you're able and you can just fly through life. You know, there is consequences to your decisions, your actions, your behaviour. Be kind to yourself and listen to yourself, and don't just accept the situation that you're in. Don't accept, you know, I know so many veterans, and I know so many traumatic incidents that some of them have been through, and it must feel almost impossible to get through, but it is possible. Everything's possible, and they can always reach out to me. There's always so many entities out there supporting and helping, and even though they think they're alone, they're really not alone. For me, I personally found that physical exercise, you know, Pilates, something soft, smooth, like not endurance, wasn't mentally taxing, you know, that really helped. But find the right person to help you. Like, the NHS is difficult. The NHS has wait times like 9 months, to a year, probably more. And people listen probably think, yeah, try 2 or 3 years, but you need to be in front of the right person to get the right support. But just never stop trying and just don't give up on yourself.